Hey, this is Tom from MVP Chess. Welcome back to my series on Bobby Fischer's seminal work, My 60 Memorable Games. In this video, we'll be analyzing game number 23 that Fischer played versus Mikhail Tal in the Chess Olympiad in 1960. You're not going to want to miss this slugfest in the French Winawer. Before we get started, don't forget to slam that subscribe button and join Team MVP. Thanks for your support. So, our first encounter between Tal and Fischer in My 60 Memorable Games came in the Canada's tournament in 1959. Tal squeaked out a draw and went on to win the Canada's tournament and defeated Botvinnik convincingly in the World Chess Championship in 1960. So, on board one in the Chess Olympiad, which is where this famous picture was taken, Tal faced Fischer for the first time as World Chess Champion. So, let's jump into the action. After e4, Tal in the previous encounter in game 17, and I'll link this video at the end in case you missed it, Tal played c5 and went in for a Sicilian Najdorf. Here, he goes for e6 against Fischer instead. And after d4, d5, knight c3, the more prosaic move in this position, the more solid move, is to play knight f6. But that doesn't suit Tal's style. He likes mental positions where calculation is paramount. He's the magician from Riga, after all. He plays bishop e4 and goes in for the French Winawer, which can create some really just absolutely crazy mental positions. So we have e5, c5, Tal strikes in the center. Fischer challenges the bishop. Now the main line of the Winawer sees black capture this knight on c3. And after knight e7, queen g4, this would lead to like really the main line of the Winawer, the so-called poison pawn variation, where white will often grab a pawn or two on the king's side, but black has good counterplay, and all three results are possible. Instead, Tal opted for a sideline bishop a5, which Fischer said was not as critical. And Fischer met this by playing pawn to b4. Good move. Fischer notes that this was the recommendation of the fourth world chess champion, Alexander Alekhine. So the game continuation saw c takes d4. If we have c takes b4, Fischer notes that after knight b5, white would get a really nice attacking position. And a sample line could continue, let's say b3 with a discovered check. White can always block this check with c3. And after bishop c7, trying to prevent this pony from slamming down on d6 and becoming an octopus knight. Don't want to allow that. Queen takes b3, knight c6, and a4, intending to bring the dark squared bishop to this wonderful diagonal. White would have a really good position. So Tal opted for c takes d4. So the knight is hanging, the bishop is hanging, but Fischer has a really nice move in this position. So you Winawer players are probably aware of this. Queen g4. Okay, we can let these pieces hang for a while because Fischer has an even greater threat, and that is to capture this pawn on g7. So if Tal were to grab this knight, you can go ahead and resign. This rook is hanging in the corner. Conversely, after king f8 defending this pawn on g7, after a4, we just saw this really thematic move in the Winawer for white before a4 and bringing the bishop to a3. Black would be hurting in this position as well. So Tal played knight e7, making some room for the rook, so it won't be hanging in the corner. So now and only now, Fischer decides to grab on a5. Tal recaptures his piece, and Fischer grabs on g7 and h7. So this isn't the main line of the Winawer. Again, Tal opted for bishop a5 instead of bishop takes c3. But we reach kind of an analogous position where Fischer has grabbed the pawn on g7, grabbed the pawn on h7, and Tal's got some dynamic play in return. So Tal continues with development. Knight c6, good move. Attacking this pawn on e5. Fischer could defend and bolster this pawn with f4, but he notes the problem in doing so is that it really hems in the queen's bishop and also weakens a number of dark squares in white's position. So instead, he just opts for simple development with knight to f3. The game continuation saw queen c7. If Tal had grabbed on a5, you got to be careful about going pawn grabbing in this position with black. Knight g5, rook f8, and f4. Black is all tied up, and there's always this latent threat of this h-pawn just storming up the board if black ever gets into a passive position. And this is one of those positions, so white would stand really, really well here. So instead, Tal plays queen c7, attacking the pawn on e5. Fischer defends by pinning the knight. So, much like Tal abandoned his king side with bishop b4, Fischer has abandoned his king side with bishop b5. So, what happens, you should ask, after rook takes g2? Now, this was not the game continuation because this would be completely losing for black. After king f1, rook g8, rook g1, and this exchange, once again, this h-pawn is just going to storm up the board and win white the game. Black just has insufficient counterplay in this position, so that's why Tal did not go in for this and instead played bishop d7. Okay, so Fischer is able now to castle the king, thereby defending the g2 pawn, and Tal castles to the queen side. So we've got an opposite sides castling position. Okay, you can see why this would, giving up these pawns on the king side would benefit Tal in this type of position because he does have an open G file, a half-open H file as well to start a kingside initiative and hopefully attack Fischer's king. Now, this was the decisive moment of the game. Fischer played in this position bishop g5, which he said was a mistake. Very natural move, though, developing the last piece, connecting the rooks. The bishop comes to a nice active square on g5. Also plugs up the g file, okay, which means rook g8 is a less active piece. But we'll see what happened in the game. Fischer, in his post-mortem analysis, now I'm sure he spent a lot of time analyzing this position. Especially, his first game against Tal as world champion. He gave this rather long forcing line where Tal is able to play some spectacular sacrifices and discoveries to win the queen, but after bishop g5, Fischer has more than enough material for the queen and would actually be able to consolidate this position and win. Now, there were some other side variations that we don't really have time to get into, but Fischer really believed that bishop takes c6 was the way to go in this position. But instead, he played bishop g5. So Tal's on the back foot here a little bit. I mean, that's just, you kind of always are on the black side of the Winawer. You really need to look for counterattacking chances and to sharpen up the position. You just can't sit there passively because Fischer is up a pawn. This past h-pawn is always a huge threat looming in the position. So Tal came up with a really nice move in this position to complicate matters and move the game into his style. Okay, chaotic game, a deep dark forest where 2 + 2 = 5, and that's really where he was in his element. So pause your videos and try to see if you can find Tal's move in this position. So congratulations if you found knight takes e5. Great move by Tal, really complicating the game, really sharpening it up. And Fischer says in his annotations, he thought Tal was up to his usual antics. This was like a speculative sacrifice, and he was just trying to confuse the fact. But this was actually a very, very sound move that Tal played, and was, even according to modern day engines, basically the only move for black in this position. So congratulations if you found that. Be sure to leave a comment if you did. So Fischer grabs on e5, and we have a rather forced line where Fischer is still up a pawn, but now is forking the queen and the rook. So I'll turn it over to you one more time in this position. What did Tal play here? Tal has another only move to stay in the game. Pause your videos and see if you can find it. So we've been mentioning throughout the game the importance of these half-open G and H files for black in the Winawer, especially when the king castles to the queen side. This can offer black a lot of important counterplay. So Tal plays the very awesome sacrifice, rook takes G2. Congratulations if you found that, opening up Fischer's king. Now, if Fischer plays the really natural move, king takes F1 here, Tal would have rook takes H2, gaining time on the queen. And after queen F7, rook H1, Tal would have an attack out of nowhere. Now, Fischer is still holding this position according to the engine, but the balance is on a knife's edge. If Fischer takes one wrong step here, he could just find himself in an absolute mating net. For example, king E2 here, queen C4. It's checkmate in 3 moves, according to Stockfish. So that's why Fischer dodged that landmine and just played king H1. Okay, the much safer move. We have queen E5. Now Fischer recaptures the bishop. Rook takes F1. Queen takes E6. And king takes G2. Now, I will turn it over to you for the last time. It's black to play in this position. What did Tal play here? He's got another only move. Pause your videos and see if you can find it. So Fischer's done a really remarkable job in this game, just avoiding all the landmines that Tal has set with his brilliant tactical play. So credit to Fischer for just navigating those waters. Now, unfortunately for you Tal fans out there, it's time to bail out. It's damage control mode now. Fischer's done a really nice job consolidating his position. He's up the exchange plus a pawn. So Tal absolutely must play queen G4 in this position and force a draw. So congratulations if you found that. And after queen G4, the players agreed to a draw because in this position, black would simply have a perpetual check. So another near miss by Fischer, but his confidence must be building now, right? He had a near miss versus Tal in the candidates in 1959. Tal went on to win that tournament and become world champion. And yet again, Fischer got a great position against the world champion, but just narrowly missed converting it. He played that natural move, bishop G5, when bishop takes C6, may have led to a winning position. So disappointing draw for Fischer, but I'm sure he was gaining a lot of confidence in his quest to become the world chess champion. So I hope you enjoyed this analysis. Don't forget, smash that subscribe button and join Team MVP. And if you missed Fischer and Tal's first encounter from My 60 Games, game number 17, be sure to check out this awesome battle in the Sicilian Najdorf. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.